Commander Alara Voss walked through the bustling spaceport of Veronine, her boots clicking against the metallic floor. The air was thick with the smell of fuel, burnt circuits, and the tang of fried food from the small vendors lining the corridor. Ships of every shape and size glided past, some hovering silently while others roared as their engines activated. Traders shouted their prices, mercenaries bickered over contracts, adventurers carried strange artifacts from distant worlds. It was chaos, but Alara thrived in chaos. Her helmet, battered and cracked, sat snugly on her head. The metal had scratches, dents, and faint symbols etched into it. Each mark was a story, though no one here would guess it. Most people only saw it as old and worn, an embarrassment in a place where sleek, shiny armor meant status. Almost immediately, a group of pilots lounging near a docking bay noticed her. They were younger, arrogant, their uniforms spotless, and their helmets gleaming under the bright lights. One of them, a tall man with a scar running across his cheek, laughed loudly. "Look at that," he shouted, pointing at Alara's helmet. "Is she going to a battle or a junkyard?" Laughter erupted around him. Some of the other pilots joined in, snickering and making jokes about her ancient helmet and lost fashion sense. Alara ignored them. She had heard such comments countless times, and they no longer stung. Her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the crowd. She could see every hidden corner, every escape route, every potential threat. That helmet had seen more battles than these jokers had ever dreamed of. A young recruit, barely out of training, nudged his friend and whispered, "Who is she?" "I've never seen her before. She must be a retired mercenary or something," his friend replied. "Look at that helmet." "I wouldn't touch it with a 10-meter pole." Lara's lips curled into a small, almost invisible smile. She didn't need to respond. Soon her actions would speak louder than any words. The laughter was interrupted by a sudden alarm. Red lights flashed across the port, and a booming voice echoed through the corridors. "Alert! Unauthorized craft entering docking zone 7. All personnel evacuate immediately." The crowd froze, their laughter turning to panic. Smoke hissed from a ruptured fuel line, and people began to scatter. The young pilots who had mocked her looked around wide-eyed. Alara didn't hesitate. She moved with calm precision, weaving through the crowd toward her ship. It was a sleek, agile craft named Shadowfire, but its real value was its pilot. Alara reached it in record time, her hands steady as she ran the pre-flight checks. The dents in her helmet reflected the flashing red lights, each one catching a glint like a memory waiting to be told. A group of small pirate ships had breached the port. They weren't heavily armed, but there were too many for the unprepared crowd. Explosions rocked the docking area as the pirates fired indiscriminately. Civilians screamed and dove for cover. While security bots scrambled to respond, Alara jumped into the cockpit of Shadowfire and engaged the thrusters. The ship lifted smoothly, the hum of the engine a comforting sound. Around her, she could see the terrified faces of those she had trained in the past. Some were frozen, some panicked, and others simply ran, hoping to survive. Her first move was defensive. She swooped down, dodging a barrage of laser fire, then banked sharply to avoid the collapsing docking platform. Each movement was calculated, precise. She knew that hesitation could mean disaster not just for her, but for everyone in the port. From the corner of her eye, she noticed the young recruits from before, hiding behind a crate, shaking with fear. One of them, Terran, tried to peek over the edge to see the battle. Alara's gaze met his for a brief moment. She gave him a small nod, a signal to stay calm. Courage could be taught, even in the heat of chaos. The pirates were growing bolder, circling around to trap the fleeing civilians. Alara engaged the targeting system, tracking multiple ships at once. Her fingers danced over the controls, each press and pull precise. She didn't just fire randomly. She predicted the enemy's moves before they even made them. Shadowfire twisted through the air, dodging lasers and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. One by one, the pirate ships were hit, their engines sparking as they tried to escape. She didn't aim to destroy immediately. Her goal was to protect the civilians and create confusion. The young pilots who had laughed at her helmet were now cowering behind crates and barrels. One of them shouted, She's good." "How is she so good?" Ilara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Each maneuver, each daring dive and twist spoke louder than any words. The helmet on her head, cracked and worn, seemed almost alive under the flashing lights, reflecting the chaos around her. A pirate ship tried to ram a fuel depot. Ilara anticipated the move, launching a precise shot that disabled its engines. The ship spiraled harmlessly into a cargo container, exploding with a burst of fire and smoke. Cheers erupted from the hiding civilians. But the young pilots looked on in stunned silence. Terran, still peeking from his hiding spot, whispered that helmet. It's like it's part of her. She's not just flying the ship, she's the ship. Ilara's focus didn't waver. She had one final pirate ship to deal with before the port was safe. It was larger, with reinforced armor and heavy weaponry. Most pilots would hesitate, but Ilara saw an opening. With a series of daring flips and sharp dives, she positioned herself behind the ship, targeting its weak points. A precise shot disabled its main engines, and it crashed into the outer wall of the port. Sliding to a stop with a cloud of smoke, silence fell for a moment, broken only by the distant alarms and the hissing of damaged circuits. The crowd slowly emerged from hiding, staring at her in awe. Even the young pilots who had mocked her before couldn't hide their amazement. One of them finally spoke, voice shaking. Who is she?" Ilara lifted her helmet slightly, revealing a calm, determined face. Her eyes scanned the crowd once more, resting briefly on Terran. A small, almost imperceptible smile crossed her lips. "I'm just someone who knows how to survive," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced even the bravest voices, and someone who never forgets the lessons of the past. Terran's eyes widened as he noticed the faint markings on her helmet. They were emblems, symbols he had only read about in old galactic histories. Each dent and scratch wasn't random, they were badges of honor. Battles fought and victories earned by a clan long thought extinct. The realization began to spread through the crowd. The laughter from earlier was replaced with murmurs of respect and curiosity. Some of the older pilots exchanged uneasy glances, whispering to one another. Could it be the Werven clan? Ilara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The helmet had already spoken for her. In its cracks and dents, it carried the legacy of a people who had faced impossible odds and survived. And now, even in a new era, their spirit lived on. As the port slowly returned to normal, Ilara stepped out of her ship. The young pilots approached her cautiously, no longer mocking, only curious and respectful. She nodded at them, acknowledging their attention, but not offering unnecessary praise. Her focus was always forward, always watching, always ready. Somewhere in the distance, the remnants of the pirate fleet were retreating. Ilara knew this was only the beginning. There were larger threats ahead, ones that would test her skills, her leadership, and the strength of the legacy she carried. But for now, the first battle had been won. And the cracked helmet on her head was no longer a source of ridicule, was a symbol. A symbol of courage, experience, and the unbroken spirit of a warrior who refused to be forgotten. And as the sons of Veranine reflected off the battered metal, Ilara Voss walked through the crowd with her head held high, ready for whatever the galaxy would throw at her next. The port of Veranine was slowly returning to its usual hum of activity. Civilians cautiously returned to the streets, trading words of relief and murmurs of curiosity about the mysterious pilot who had saved them. The young pilots who had mocked Ilara's helmet the day before now exchanged nervous glances. For some, the shock of witnessing her skill in action still lingered like an unshakable weight. Ilara walked past the damaged docking bays, her eyes scanning every movement. Even amidst the chaos, she remained alert. There were signs that the pirate attack had not been a simple, isolated incident. Something larger was at play. Her instincts, honed through years of survival and battle, told her this was just the beginning. A small voice called out from behind a stack of crates. "Commander Voss?" Ilara turned to see Terran, the young recruit who had observed her so closely during the attack. His face was pale, but his eyes shone with admiration and curiosity. He stepped forward, hesitating as if unsure whether to speak. You were amazing," he said finally. "I've never seen anyone fly like that. And your helmet. It's incredible." Lara studied him for a moment. There was something about Terran eagerness, a raw potential that reminded her of herself when she was young. She nodded once. Simply, "Thank you," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried a quiet authority. "It isn't about being amazing. It's about being prepared." Terran's gaze shifted to the helmet, lingering on the faint symbols etched into its surface. "Those marks. They're not just scratches, are they?" he asked hesitantly. Ilara's fingers brushed the worn metal. "No. Each one tells a story. A battle, a victory, a lesson learned. They belong to a clan long thought extinct, the Werven clan." Terran's eyes widened. The Werven clan. "But they've been gone for centuries. How can you?" Ilara cut him off gently. "Some things are never truly gone. Legends live on, even if the people themselves vanish. And in my case, I carry their history." Terran absorbed her words, his respect growing by the second. He realized that this wasn't just a story of skillet, it was a story of legacy. Before he could ask more, an alert flashed across the port's communication network. The screen above the docking bay displayed a cluster of ships entering the outer perimeter. These were not the small pirate ships from earlier. These were larger, more organized, and heavily armed. Ilara's eyes narrowed. "They're coming back," she said. "And they're not alone this time." A small crowd of onlookers began to gather, murmuring nervously. "What is she going to do?" someone asked. Ilara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her next moves would show them all. She sprinted toward Shadowfire, which had been undergoing minor repairs after the earlier skirmish. Engineers waved at her, but she motioned them aside. There was no time for delays. She climbed into the cockpit, her hands instinctively moving over the controls. Each switch and button felt like an extension of herself. The incoming ships were fast, but Ilara was faster. Shadowfire leapt into the air, dodging lasers as the attackers fired indiscriminately. Her strategy was precise. She didn't just react, she anticipated, predicting each movement and exploiting weaknesses with calm, deliberate efficiency. The larger ships formed a loose formation, attempting to trap her in a crossfire. Most pilots would have panicked, but Ilara remained steady. Her experience told her that fear was the enemy and focus was the ally. Taren. Now, hidden behind a cargo container, watched with awe. She's not just a pilot," he whispered. "She's a tactician, a warrior. Every move is perfect." Ilara's thoughts were already ahead of the battle. She knew the port's layout intimately, the docking bays, the supply lines, even the areas civilians tended to hide. Using this knowledge, she maneuvered Shadowfire in a series of daring flips and spins, drawing the enemy ships into a trap of their own making. One of the attackers, a heavily armed cruiser, tried to ram the central fuel depot. Ilara anticipated it. With a sharp burst of speed, she intercepted the cruiser, firing a precise shot that disabled its engines. The ship spiraled harmlessly into the outer wall, exploding in a shower of sparks and debris. The onlookers gasped. Whispers spread. Is she really from the Werven clan? Even among her enemies, recognition flickered. The Werven clan had been feared for centuries for their unmatched tactics and fearless warriors. To see someone bearing their symbols in action was enough to make even seasoned pilots hesitate. Lara didn't pause to relish the recognition. There was still one more ship to deal with, a larger, more dangerous vessel. It moved with calculated precision. Its weapons aimed directly at the fleeing civilians. The young pilots who had mocked her earlier were frozen in fear. One of them stammered, She's going to. Ilara's voice cut through the comms calmly but firmly. Get to safety now. Her ship twisted through the air, weaving between laser fire and debris. The final pirate cruiser fired repeatedly, but Ilara anticipated every shot. She adjusted her thrusters and launched a counterattack, hitting the ship's weak points. Sparks flew, and the cruiser's engines failed, sending it tumbling into the outer docks. Silence fell once again. Civilians emerged cautiously, their faces filled with awe and relief. Even the young pilots who had mocked her helmet before approached. Hesitant but respectful, Tan stepped forward, his admiration clear. "Commander Voss, that was incredible. I've never seen anyone fight like that, not even in simulations." Ilara studied him carefully. "It isn't just skill. It's understanding the battle, knowing your enemy, and trusting yourself. And sometimes it's about carrying the lessons of those who came before you." Terran glanced at the helmet again. "So, all those dents, they're battles from your clan?" Ilara nodded. "Every one of them. Each mark is a story. Each dent is a reminder of what it means to survive, to fight, and to protect." Terran's eyes shone with determination. "I want to learn," he said quietly. "I want to be ready. Like you." Ilara's gaze softened slightly. "It takes more than courage to be ready. It takes discipline, patience, and respect for what came before. If you're willing to commit to that, then perhaps one day you will be ready." The moment was interrupted by a new alert. A smaller fleet was approaching from the far side of the planet, their intentions unclear. Ilara's eyes narrowed. "They're testing us," she muttered. "They want to see what we're capable of, and they will regret it." She turned back to Terran. "Get the others ready. We have more work to do." As the young recruit ran to gather the remaining pilots, Ilara glanced at her helmet. The light of the setting sun reflected off the metal, highlighting each scar, each dent, and each symbol. To the untrained eye, it was just a damaged helmet. But to anyone who knew the history, it was a declaration of skill, experience, an unbroken spirit. Ilara knew the road ahead would be dangerous. The pirates weren't working alone, and larger threats were looming in the shadows. But she also knew that with the right strategy, courage, and teamwork, the impossible could be overcome. The first encounter had shown her new recruits the meaning of true skill, and more importantly, the meaning of legacy. They had witnessed that the spirit of the Werven clan was still alive, not just in her, but in the hope and inspiration she brought to those around her. As she prepared for the next wave, Ilara took a deep breath. The battle was far from over, but she was ready. Every dent on her helmet was a promise, a warning, and a lesson. Those who underestimated her would soon learn that history was not something that faded with time. It was something that could rise again, stronger than ever, and in the skies above Veronine. Shadowfire roared to life, carrying its pilot into the unknown. Ready to face whatever challenges awaited her next? The night sky over Veronine was painted with streaks of orange and purple as the twin suns began to set. The airport had been cleared, the damaged docks cordoned off, and the emergency teams worked tirelessly to repair the broken infrastructure. Yet even amid the cleanup, whispers about Commander Ilara Voss spread like wildfire. No one could stop talking about the pilot whose cracked helmet and unmatched skill had saved hundreds of lives. Ilara sat quietly in her ship, Shadowfire, surveying the horizon. The earlier skirmish had given her a glimpse of what she was up against. The pirate attacks weren't random. They were coordinated, testing the defenses of the port and probing for weaknesses. And the more she considered it, the clearer it became. Someone, somewhere, was watching, studying her moves and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A soft knock echoed from the cockpit's door. Terran stepped inside, carrying a small tablet displaying tactical maps and incoming communications. His eyes were filled with curiosity and nervous excitement. "Commander Voss," he said cautiously, I need to know more. About your helmet, your clan, everything. I can't explain it, but I feel like knowing might help me understand how to survive, how to fight." Ilara studied the young recruit. There was courage in his eyes, yes, but also a hunger for knowledge, a hunger she recognized all too well. She motioned for him to sit. "You want to know about the Werven clan?" she said slowly, tracing her fingers over the edge of her helmet. "Few have ever asked. Fewer still have lived to tell the stories. The clan was not just warriors. We were strategists, protectors, and survivors. We faced enemies that would have destroyed ordinary humans, and we survived." Terran leaned in, eager to hear every word. But extinct? What happened? Ilara's eyes grew distant, reflecting memories that were centuries old, though her mind recalled them as clearly as if they had happened yesterday. Time, betrayal, and relentless enemies. Entire fleets sought to wipe us out because they feared what we could do. We fought, we adapted, and we survived as long as we could, but one by one, we were hunted down. I am one of the last to carry the legacy. Daral swallowed hard. And your helmet? A faint smile curved her lips. Each dent, each scratch is a memory. A battle survived, a lesson learned. This helmet has been with me through countless conflicts. It is more than protection, it is history, honor, and a warning to those who think they can underestimate the wearer. Outside the cockpit, the lights of the city reflected in her helmet. What had once been a source of ridicule now glimmered with reverence. To the untrained eye, it was battered armor. To those who knew the story, it was a symbol of survival against impossible odds. Can I carry some of that with me? Terran asked hesitantly. I want to learn not just about fighting, but about strategy, about courage. I want to fight with honor. Ilara studied him for a long moment. Courage can be taught. Honor can be understood. But only if you are willing to risk failure, to face fear, and to learn from it. Are you ready for that? Terran nodded without hesitation. Yes, Commander, I am. Ilara stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then listen closely and remember this. Battles are not won by strength alone. They are won by observation, by patience, and by knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. Before they could continue, a new alert flashed on the tactical map. Another fleet had been detected on the edge of the planet's orbit, larger, more organized and heavily armed than any force Ilara had faced that day. These were no ordinary pirates. Their movements suggested advanced training and coordination. Someone was leading them with knowledge of human tactics, perhaps even knowledge of the Werven strategies. Ilara's eyes narrowed. They've studied us, she muttered. They've seen what happened today. They know we are capable, and they are coming to challenge us directly. Terran leaned over the console, studying the fleet's formation. Commander, there are at least 12 ships, heavily armed. They'll hit the city if we don't stop them. Ilara's fingers moved over the controls. We won't let that happen. Not on my watch. Get the recruits ready. We're going to show them that the Werven legacy still lives, and that humanity will never back down. Within minutes, the recruits had gathered, their fear replaced by awe and determination. They were untested, inexperienced, but under Ilara's guidance, they had a chance to become something more. Something capable of facing an enemy that believed they were the hunters. Ilara gathered the team in the command center. The room was tense, filled with anticipation. Listen carefully, she said, her voice calm but commanding. These ships are not mindless. They are organized, intelligent, and dangerous. If we act recklessly, many will die. But if we act with strategy, patience, and courage, we can turn their strength against them. She pointed at the holographic map displaying the enemy fleet. Terran, you will coordinate the defensive drones. Keep them close, but don't let them engage until I give the signal. The others will follow my maneuvers. Watch, learn, and act precisely. Every move counts. The recruits nodded, their nervous energy focused into determination. They were about to face a force that could easily destroy them. But under Ilira's command, they felt prepared. Shadow fire lifted into the sky, engines glowing like molten silver. The recruits followed in their smaller ships, moving as a unit, ready to engage the incoming fleet. As they approached the enemy formation, Lara's mind recalled the stories of her ancestors. Each battle fought by the Werven clan had been a lesson in strategy, patience, and adaptation. She remembered how her forebears had turned desperate situations into victories, relying on ingenuity rather than brute force. Those lessons were not just history, they were living tactics. Ready to be applied once more, the first wave of enemy ships moved aggressively, attempting to divide the human squadron. Lasers streaked across the darkening sky, lighting up the battlefield in bursts of red and blue. Civilians watching from below held their breath. This was more than a battle, it was a display of human ingenuity and courage against a calculated enemy. Alara's movements were precise and fluid. She weaved between attacks, drawing enemy fire away from her squadron and guiding her recruits through the chaos. Terran's eyes widened as he followed her maneuvers. Every twist, every turn, every calculated retreat was a lesson in combat and leadership. The enemy fleet, confident in their numbers and firepower, did not anticipate the strategies Alara employed. Using their aggression against them, she lured several ships into a narrow canyon near the edge of the planet. The canyon walls reflected laser fire unpredictably, creating confusion and disarray among the attackers. "This is how the Werven fight," Alara muttered to herself, recalling centuries-old tactics passed down through stories, symbols, and experiences. Use your environment. Turn the enemy's strength against them. The recruits followed her lead, slowly but surely gaining confidence. Even in their fear, they trusted her commands. In moments of hesitation, Alara's calm authority guided them forward. Terran fired his ship's weapons under her direction, hitting precise targets that caused the enemy formation to falter. Other recruits followed suit, their attacks coordinated and deadly. For the first time, they understood that courage alone was not enough. They needed skill, strategy, and trust in one another. The battle continued into the night, and Alara's helmet caught the light of explosions, each dent reflecting a different story. She was a living reminder that history was not lost, that lessons learned through sacrifice and struggle could shape the present. Finally, the enemy commander, a larger, heavily armed ship, tried to flank the human squadron. Alara anticipated the maneuver, positioning Shadowfire perfectly to intercept. With a calculated series of maneuvers, she disabled the flagship's engines, causing it to drift helplessly into a rocky cliffside. The remaining enemy ships, seeing their leader defeated, retreated into the darkness of space. Silence returned to the battlefield. Civilians cheered, and the recruits, exhausted but elated, gathered around Alara. She removed her helmet, revealing her face lit by the stars above. "Today," she said quietly, "you learned more than fighting. You learned strategy, courage, and the importance of legacy. Remember it. And never forget that even when we face overwhelming odds, humanity can rise stronger than ever." Terran looked at her, eyes wide with respect and admiration. "I understand now, Commander. The helmet. Your legacy. It's not just history. It's hope." Alara nodded. "Exactly. And now we prepare. The galaxy is vast and threats are many. But with courage, skill, and respect for what came before, we can face anything." Above Veronine, Shadowfire gleamed against the stars, a symbol of legacy, strength, and the enduring spirit of humanity. The sun had barely risen over the horizon of Veronine when alarms blared across the spaceport. The sky, still tinged with purple and gold from the fading night, darkened with the silhouettes of incoming ships. This was no small raid like before this. It was a full-scale assault, a fleet with a clear objective: to crush anyone who dared challenge them. Commander Alara Voss tightened the straps on her helmet, its familiar dents and scratches glinting in the morning light. Each mark reflected a story, a battle survived, a lesson learned. Today the helmet was more than protection, it was a symbol of resilience, strategy, and legacy. "Everyone ready?" Alara's voice rang across the comms. Her squadron of recruits, still nervous from their first taste of real battle, answered in unison, "Yes, Commander." She glanced at Terran, who was manning one of the smaller interceptors. His hands were steady now, his fear replaced by determination. "Stay focused. Trust your instincts. And remember, we fight together." The enemy fleet advanced, weapons ready, lasers flicking like fire across the void. They were larger, faster, and better equipped than any foe Alara had faced on this planet, but she smiled faintly beneath her helmet. Experience and cunning could outweigh sheer numbers, and she had both in abundance. Ilaru's ship, Shadowfire, led the formation. The squadron followed, moving as a coordinated unit. Each pilot knew their role, each maneuver planned with precision. Alara's voice guided them through the chaos, her commands calm, firm, and unyielding. "Split into two formations," she ordered. "Terran, take the left flank. Draw them toward the canyon pass. The rest follow me on the right. Remember, the canyon amplifies our advantage. Use it." The enemy commander had anticipated human tactics, but he had not anticipated the ingenuity of the Werven clan. As the fleet split, they found themselves trapped in a narrowing canyon. Their larger ships struggled to maneuver, while Ilara's smaller interceptors darted through the crags and cliffs like shadows. "Focus on their engines first," Ilara commanded. "Disable, don't destroy. We want them grounded and vulnerable, not gone." Terran fired with precision, hitting a heavy cruiser's engines. The ship's thrusters sputtered, sending it spinning into the canyon walls. Sparks flew, debris scattered, and the enemy formation faltered. Ilara twisted shadow fire sharply, dodging a barrage of laser fire from 2 remaining ships. Her maneuvers were smooth, deliberate. Every move was calculated, every attack planned. The recruits followed her lead, their confidence growing with each successful strike. One of the enemy ships tried to break the canyon formation and escape. Ilara anticipated the move. She accelerated, weaving between incoming fire, and disabled its weapons with a well-aimed shot. The ship tumbled harmlessly into a cliffside. The battle raged on, the canyon echoing with the sounds of explosions and laser fire. Smoke and sparks filled the air, and the sky above turned a chaotic mix of light and shadow. Despite the chaos, Ilara remained calm. She saw opportunities where others saw only danger. She exploited the terrain, guiding her squadron to maximize the advantage of every maneuver. Terran's voice came over the comms. "Steady now. Commander, we've disabled half of their ships. The others are trying to regroup." "Good," Ilara replied. "Keep them disoriented. Force them to make mistakes. Remember, strategy always beats brute force." The enemy commander, realizing his advantage slipping, grew desperate. He ordered his ships to converge on shadow fire, hoping to overwhelm the leader and scatter the squadron. But Ilara had anticipated this. With a daring twist, she led the attack into a narrow canyon corridor, forcing the enemy ships into a single line. "Now," she shouted.
Ow.
The squadron launched a coordinated strike.
Ow.
Lasers and missiles hit every target in unison, disabling engines, weapons, and shields. The enemy ships, once confident and organized, were now scattered, crippled, and vulnerable. Even in retreat, the remaining ships hesitated. They had never faced humans who fought not just with skill, but with cunning, precision, and unity. They had never faced the Werven tactics in full force. Ilara guided Shadowfire to the rear of the formation, targeting the enemy flagship. Its massive weapons fired repeatedly, but her ship twisted and flipped, dodging each attack with near-perfect timing. She struck the ship's engines, causing it to spin out of control. The remaining fleet, seeing their leader disabled, panicked and began a chaotic retreat. Teard and the recruits cheered, though they remained focused. They had learned the meaning of courage, leadership, and trust. They had learned that even against overwhelming odds, humanity could rise stronger than any enemy. Ilara lowered her helmet slightly, revealing her face to the squadron. Her eyes were calm, determined, and unwavering. "We fight for more than survival," she said. "We fight for honor, for our people, for the legacy of those who came before us." The recruits nodded, understanding now that their actions were part of something larger, continuation of history. A reflection of human resilience, and a living example of the Werven clan's enduring spirit. The battle ended with the enemy fleet retreating into the darkness of space. Leaving behind wreckage and a stunned population on Vera 9, civilians emerged from hiding, cheering and waving at the squadron. For them, it was not just a victory. In battle, it was a reminder of human courage, ingenuity, and the ability to rise against impossible odds. Ilara's helmet, battered and dented, reflected the morning light. To the civilians, it was a symbol of hope and protection.
Ow.
To the recruits, it was a lesson in leadership, strategy, and the power of legacy. To herself, it was a reminder that every mark carried a story, and every story had a lesson. As the squadron regrouped, Terran approached her. "Commander," he said, voice full of respect, "I understand now. It's not just skill that makes a warrior, it's heart, wisdom, and courage. Your helmet, your legacy. It's a guide for all of us. Ilara placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the hope for the future. Exactly, Terran. And remember this: battles will come, challenges will rise, and enemies will test you. But with courage, unity, and respect for what came before, humanity can face anything. The squadron returned to the port, the citizens cheering, their admiration clear. For the first time, the young pilots who had laughed at her helmet looked at it with awe. No one mocked it now. Every dent, every scratch, every symbol told a story of courage, survival, and unbroken spirit. Ilara stepped out of shadow fire, her eyes scanning the horizon. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The enemy would regroup, analyze their defeat, and return. When they did, humanity would be ready. The recruits followed her, ready to learn, ready to fight, ready to carry forward the lessons of the day. Terran glanced at her helmet once more, now understanding what it truly represented: a symbol of courage, a guide for strategy, and proof that even when faced with impossible odds, humans could rise to greatness. Above Vera9, the morning sun reflected off the scars on her helmet, turning each mark into a shining reminder. History was not forgotten. Legacy lived on, and the human spirit was stronger than any threat. Ilara knew the next battle would come, and she would face it with the same calm, precision, and courage that had guided her through centuries of inherited knowledge. The Werven clan's teachings, etched into her very being and her helmet, were alive. And humanity, under her guidance, would rise to meet any challenge with honor, skill, and unbroken resolve. The citizens cheered as she passed, the squadron following her lead. Today had been a victory. Today had been proof that courage, intelligence, and unity could overcome even the most formidable odds. And the legend of the cracked helmet, once mocked, now shone brighter than any polished armor in the galaxy. The aftermath of the battle left Vera9 quieter than usual. Smoke still rose from damaged docks, and repair crews worked tirelessly to restore the port to its former efficiency. Civilians cautiously ventured out, whispering about the events they had witnessed. The story of Commander Ilara Voss and her squadron had spread faster than any official report. Her cracked helmet, once ridiculed, was now a symbol of awe. Citizens who had once mocked its battered metal now paused to look at it, tracing the dents and scratches with wonder. Each mark told a story. A battle survived, a lesson learned, a life protected. Ilara stepped off Shadowfire, her boots echoing on the metallic floor of the spaceport. Her squadron followed closely, each pilot exhausted but filled with pride. They had faced overwhelming odds, fought with precision, and emerged victorious. More than that, they had learned what it truly meant to lead, to fight, and to honor history. Terran walked beside her, his young face still reflecting. "Commander," he said, "I don't think anyone could ever understand what we saw today. Not just the battle, but everything. Your helmet, the tactics, your comets, like watching history itself in motion." Ilara nodded slightly. "That is exactly what it is, Terran. History, legacy, courage, they are all connected. The past is not something to be forgotten. It is something to learn from, something to carry forward." As they moved through the port, other pilots approached cautiously. Some were younger recruits who had been part of the previous skirmishes. Others were seasoned fighters from nearby sectors. Every one of them looked at her helmet, eyes wide with respect, some almost reverent. An older pilot, one of the initial skeptics, stepped forward. "Commander Voss, I owe you an apology. I mocked your helmet, your history. I didn't understand. But today you showed us what it truly means to lead." Ilara gave a faint smile. "Respect is earned, not demanded. Remember that for your own battles." Citizens and pilots gathered, forming a small crowd around her. Children peeked from behind crates, adults whispered about the legend of the Werven clan, and recruits like Terran listened intently, absorbing every word and action. A representative from the Galactic Council approached. He was older, wearing the formal uniform of an official observer, his expression a mixture of caution and admiration. Commander Voss, he said, voice measured. The Council has long debated the legacy of the Werven clan. We believed their knowledge lost. But today, you have demonstrated that their wisdom, courage, and strategy are not gone. You have revived a legend, and humanity benefits because of it. Alara's gaze softened, but she remained humble. I am only the carrier of the legacy. The Werven clan's teachings belong to all who are willing to learn. The Council's recognition is not mine, it is humanity's. The representative nodded, clearly impressed. Then perhaps you will allow us to share your knowledge, your tactics, and your experience. Others could benefit, and future generations could be trained in your methods. Ilara thought for a moment. Sharing knowledge was powerful, but dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. Yet, she saw the potential for human strength to grow. Very well, she said carefully, but only with those who are willing to respect the principles, courage, strategy, unity, and honor. Those who seek only power without responsibility will learn nothing. Terran's eyes lit up. So we could train new pilots. Teach them the Werven strategies. Ilara smiled faintly, a spark of pride in her gaze. Yes, Terran, you will help carry the lessons forward. You have seen what is possible today. Remember it, and pass it on. The recruits exchanged excited glances, their fear from earlier battles replaced by determination. They understood that the future depended on knowledge, courage, and teamwork. They had seen the example firsthand, and now they were ready to follow it. Outside the port, the twin suns shone brighter, reflecting off the metallic surfaces of Shadowfire. The battered helmet on Alara's head gleamed, each dent a story, each scratch a lesson. It had once been a symbol of ridicule, but now it was a beacon of hope and inspiration. Civilians approached, offering small tokens of gratitude, flowers, supplies, and simple gifts. Ilara accepted them quietly, acknowledging their respect without fanfare. To her, it was never about praise, it was about survival, honor, and responsibility. Taya lingered nearby, studying her helmet. Every mark. Each one is a battle, isn't it? He asked softly. Ilara nodded. Yes. Every dent, every scratch is a memory. A story of courage, survival, and the lessons we carry forward. Remember them well, Terran. They are more valuable than any weapon or ship. The young recruit's eyes shone. I understand now, Commander. I will carry these lessons with me. Always. Ilara watched him for a moment, seeing the spark of potential that could grow into true leadership. Humanity was not defined by its machines or technology, was defined by its people, by their courage, their wisdom, and their willingness to face impossible odds. A distant rumble reminded everyone that the galaxy was vast, and threats were never truly gone. But Alara's squadron, inspired and trained, was ready. They had witnessed the power of strategy, courage, and unity firsthand, and they would carry it forward into every battle, every challenge, every corner of the galaxy. Ilara turned to her squadron. Today, we have shown what is possible when humans stand together, and they respect history, and when they face danger with courage. Let this victory be a reminder. No matter how strong the enemy seems, humanity will rise. Always. The squadron stood in unison, a mixture of pride and determination in their eyes. They had seen leadership in its purest form, learned lessons beyond any manual or simulation, and discovered the meaning of honor, courage. In unity, the older pilots who had once doubted her now nodded in respect. Civilians whispered tales of the hero in the cracked helmet. Children pointed to her as she passed, their eyes filled with admiration and wonder. The legend of the Werven clan, thought lost to time, had found life once more. Ilara's gaze swept across the horizon, toward the stars. There would be more battles, more threats, and more challenges. But she was ready. Her squadron was ready. And humanity, armed with courage, ingenuity, and legacy, was ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. The helmet on her head, battered but shining in the morning light, was more than metal and scratches. It was history, survival, courage, and inspiration. It was proof that even in a galaxy filled with danger, fear, and uncertainty, humans could rise, fight, and triumph. And as Alara walked through the port, the citizens cheering and the recruits following, she knew one thing. The legacy of the Werven clan carried through her was not just alive, it would guide humanity for generations to come. She looked down at Terran, who followed closely, his eyes filled with awe. "Remember this day," she said softly. "Remember the lessons, the courage, and the unity. Humanity's strength is in its people. Never forget that." Terran nodded, a promise in his gaze. "I won't, Commander. I promise." Alara smiled faintly, her helmet catching the sunlight once more. The battle had ended, but the story of the legacy would continue. Humanity had shown that it could rise against impossible odds, that courage and unity could triumph over fear and numbers. And the cracked helmet, once laughed at, now stood as a shining symbol for all to see. The citizens of Veranine would tell the story for years to come. The recruits would carry the lessons forward into future battles. And Alara Voss, bearer of the Werven clan's legacy, would continue to guide humanity, reminding everyone that even in the darkest hours, courage, wisdom, and honor could light the way. As the suns rose higher, illuminating the bustling port, one thing was certain: the legend of the cracked helmet had only just begun, and humanity, inspired by history and led by courage, would rise to every challenge that lay ahead.